Ever since cryptocurrency first came into being, there has been much debate over which role crypto should play. This discussion has raged on for years in the Bitcoin community in particular. Some believe that Bitcoin should primarily operate as a sort of digital cash that can be used in everyday life, while others argue that Bitcoin is a digital gold that should be bought and held for extended periods of time. Others still see Bitcoin primarily as a vehicle of volatility that exists primarily for trading purposes. However, with the entrance of an increasing number of institutional players into the Bitcoin space and the ongoing unresolution of a number of technical difficulties on the Bitcoin network, Bitcoin seems to have made a definite movement away from the digital cash side of the battle and towards the digital gold side. But while Bitcoin is establishing itself as a digital gold, other cryptocurrencies are working to fill the gap when it comes to digital cash. One of these is Dash, a cryptocurrency created in 2014 that describes its purpose as, quote, giving you the freedom to move your money any way you want, and, quote, moving money anywhere to anyone instantly for less than a cent. Recently, finance magnates sat down with Ryan Taylor, chief executive of Dash Core Group, to discuss governance on Dash, what decentralization really means, and the future of cryptocurrency usage. Ryan, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do? How did you get involved in this cryptocurrency world in the first place?
Well, I have kind of a more traditional Wall Street type background. I have an MBA from Columbia University in finance and economics. I was an associate partner at McKinsey in their financial services practice, where I spent 7 years, and from there joined a hedge fund focused on the payments space. And it was during my time at the hedge fund that I first got exposed to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and started to learn about the technology. And it was very intriguing. As a payments expert, I could see immediately that cryptocurrencies had a combination of attributes that no other payment type had. Had a lot of the attributes of cash, but obviously could be spent online. And so I felt like there were strong use cases for it. I also felt like, there's a lot of flaws with the technology. And so I just became very intrigued with it. I started exploring the space back in 2012, 2013. And by late 2013, I was completely hooked.
Okay, so you went from sort of this Wall Street background, and you ended up, being part of the creation and the development of this totally new cryptocurrency. So you mentioned that you saw some flaws in the existing technology. How did your work with Dash work to address those flaws? What were those flaws?
Well, anyone that's kind of attempted to introduce cryptocurrency to someone new, I think immediately starts to run into barriers because it's difficult to understand. It's difficult to use. It's a little scary to use. You've got cryptographic addresses exposed to the users. It's not very fast. It's not, comparing it to a credit card or other experiences that we're used to, like Venmo or PayPal. It takes a long time for a transaction to confirm, and that doesn't make it very useful at the point of sale. It's perfectly fine if you're ordering something to be delivered, but if you're trying to place a bet on a betting website before halftime, or you're trying to purchase something at a register, it doesn't work very well. And so I really noticed a lot of the flaws as a payment type very early on, despite the fact that this was novel and had a lot of attributes that other payment types didn't. At the time, pretty much any other cryptocurrency, with a few exceptions, was a copy and paste of Bitcoin, with a few attributes changed in terms of total coin supply or how often it had a supply reduction or something.
Hmm.
but most of them were just configuration changes. And what I noticed about Dash was that um, it was the first coin to really recognize that there is more than one activity that adds value to a network and should
Hmm.
be compensated. And in the case of Bitcoin, miners, or the ones who confirm transactions to the blockchain, that's the only paid role in the network. Everyone else is volunteering. The developers are volunteering. The server providers that relay messages around the networks, they're volunteering. And so Dash had introduced the concept of the Masternode back in 2014. And this is a new paid entity. It's the people that run the network, that keep a full copy of the blockchain, that relay the messages around, and it pays for their infrastructure. And when you have infrastructure that's paid for, it can do a lot for many of the attributes around scalability, keeping transaction costs low, in terms of developing new features that
Hmm.
that can reside on this network of paid infrastructure. And I didn't know exactly where all of that would lead at the time, but I recognized it as an improvement, and I started to follow the community. Um, and about midway through 2014, I reached out to the founder of Dash, Evan Duffield, and I just asked him if he'd be interested in meeting with me. And
Hmm.
from there, I kind of fell down the rabbit hole. And in the meantime, Dash has rolled out a number of consumer-facing features that take advantage of that masternode layer of the network, and these are features that wouldn't be possible without it. And so I think that Dash over the years has been able to improve the user experience of cryptocurrency, and it continues to be our focus. And I think that that's really the missing component at this point in time, is the ability for average people to be able to jump right in and use it without taking a college course.
Yeah, yeah, literally in some cases. So how in a practical way, what is Dash doing at this particular moment in time in order to get, people using cryptocurrency without taking a college course, and also, have those tactics been effective? Because I know that this is something that Dash has been working on for a number of years. So, as you've introduced more and more features that make Dash, at least in theory, easier to use, have you seen more users come onto the network?
Well, I think that we've rolled out new features continuously over the last few years that do make the user experience better,
Hmm.
and we have a ways to go. So I think, just looking back in time, what are some of the features that we rolled out that are
Right.
consumer facing? The first was privacy. We had an optional privacy feature that adds safety to the network for people that are using it. We're well known for that, and had been for a long time, kind of classified as a so-called privacy coin. Really, what that feature is it's a privacy enhancing technique that's available on Bitcoin and other networks. It's called CoinJoin, and it basically complicates transactions so that it's harder to spy on people, basically, on the network.
Right.
Um, and I think that privacy is kind of an important default to have on a network, um, for several reasons. And that was kind of the initial use case for Dash. Beyond that, though, we really started to focus on other ways we could leverage the Masternode network. One of those was Instant Send. That was first introduced back in early 2015, and it basically allowed for transactions to instantly confirm, in a way that merchants would allow you to purchase something, walk out of their store with the goods, and not worry about whether or not the transaction would go through. It basically confirmed them right away. That early implementation was not that scalable. It wasn't on by default, and there were additional fees for using it. And so we just didn't see a lot of uptake of that. But we continued to iterate and improve. We introduced chain locks and an improved version of Instant Send that basically makes Dash very cash-like at this point.
Right, okay.
At this point in time, you can actually, I could send Dash to you and you could spend it right away. And the end recipient would have no risk that that transaction wouldn't go through. Right now, to get that same type of experience with other cryptocurrencies, you have to wait about an hour for each one of those hops. And in our case, it takes less than 2 seconds per hop. And so when you really speed things up, you're improving the user experience and making it so that you open up new use cases. I, for example, could walk up to an ATM, purchase some Dash with physical cash, and then I could go over to a turnstile and use my Dash at a turnstile and have it open. And so, you know, as we kind of improve that basic user experience of using cryptocurrency, you're not only making the experience better for people and more familiar to them, you're also opening up potentially new use cases. And so what we've seen with the introduction of this technology is that more regular folks, you know, that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be using cryptocurrency have started using it. And probably our greatest success story has been in Venezuela, where we have thousands of merchants that accept it. And they see users walking in the door and using it. Oftentimes, Dash is more used than even Bitcoin on some payment platforms that were integrated in down there. And so, you know, the user experience is good. The transaction fees are low because we've made it so scalable. And at times when, you know, the network fee on Bitcoin is as high as it is, it just doesn't make sense to make purchases at the point of sale with Bitcoin. And so people do recognize the value, and it does, you know, we've been getting consistent growth in our transaction counts every quarter for the last 2 years. And so, you know, we've really seen a great deal of real world adoption that a lot of other cryptocurrencies just don't have.
When it comes to use cases and ways that Dash is being used in the real world, you mentioned Venezuela and, you know, seeing the success story for Dash there. Well, what else have you seen in the way of use cases and adoption, you know, outside of Venezuela and in other parts of the world?
Yeah, so we do have communities in other locations around the world where there seems to be some level of concentration. Some examples are Thailand, certain countries in Africa, and outside of that, we've seen some usage within certain verticals. One of those is gaming.
Okay.
We were recently integrated into a platform called ReadyRaider. It basically is a tool that allows guilds of players that cooperate within a game to track what their spoils are from, you know, conquering enemies and so on, and being able to split those up among them. And Dash is the exclusive payment method there. And it's largely due to the speed and the payment experience that people have. And we've noticed that, you know, in talking with some of our partners like eGifter sees the much disproportionate level of Dash usage among gamers and gaming cards being purchased. And so it does seem like we might skew a bit younger in terms of our users, and you know, that data would point to the fact that they skew younger and are more oriented towards online. We've also been integrated into quite a number of betting websites. And one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of those do integrate some of Dash's advanced features. One of the differences that I've noticed is that Dash is oftentimes the fastest deposit or withdrawal method on those platforms. And so we are seeing Dash being implemented in a way that gives it a differentiated experience. The last is we've seen tremendous growth in trading. Because Dash is instant and we've had that instant feature integrated into a number of the major exchanges, including Coinbase. They honor chain lock deposits. A number of exchanges honor instant send deposits, so they do deposits within 2 seconds. And so Dash is often the fastest way to deposit value onto an exchange. And so if you're doing arbitrage trading or you're looking to rebalance your assets between 2 different exchanges, using fiat through the banking system, that takes days. Using any other cryptocurrency can take an hour or 2. Using Dash, you can rebalance within a few seconds. And so we're seeing more and more usage within the trading space. And that, of course, gives Dash better liquidity. It helps us to have fuller order books on the exchanges. And that's really beneficial to everyone.
Right. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how Dash is structured. So you are the Dash Core Group CEO, but you're not the CEO of the Dash network. So can you tell us a little bit about how that works and how the governance of Dash is structured?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked the question because there's often a misperception.
Right.
The Dash network is decentralized. No one owns it. No one person operates it. Very similar to Bitcoin in that regard. The difference is that Dash has something called a proposal system. I mentioned earlier that Dash was the first cryptocurrency that recognized that there's more than one way to add value to the network and more than one role that should be incentivized. And initially that was just masternodes and miners. But in mid 2015, the project introduced our proposal system. And the way that it works is anyone can put a proposal up to the Dash network to receive funding. And the masternodes vote on each of those proposals. Each masternode gets one vote, and the highest ranking proposals pay out first as part of a monthly budget cycle. And Dash Core Group is one of many entities that serve the network. And so the network itself does not have a CEO, but there are many different entities that serve the network in various capacities. Now, Dash Core Group is a very pivotal and important organization to Dash. We're primarily responsible for the protocol itself. We also do quite a bit of business development and marketing, manage social media and things of that nature for the network, and really help nurture and grow it. In addition, we've got teams across the globe that are working in local markets in order to gain adoption for Dash. And so it's through this proposal system that the network decides on how to allocate the resources available to the proposal system, and decide on which teams receive funding from their requests. And Dash Core Group, we're organized as a regular company. We're a Delaware C Corp, and we have a internal organization structure similar to any other organization, and that allows us to be, quite organized and coordinated, as opposed to, a lot of these other projects have volunteers or major investors that fund certain activities, but they lack the kind of formal coordination that we have. But what is unique about Dash Core Group is its ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I don't own Dash Core Group. We took 100% of the shares in Dash Core Group, and we issued those shares to a trust. And the trust beneficiaries are the network operators, the masternodes.
Okay.
And so the trust protectors are elected by the masternodes themselves. And so in essence, we're network controlled.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a profit incentive. We draw from the network what we need to operate, and that funds the activities that we do to benefit the network.
Just briefly for people who might not know, can you talk a little bit about what masternodes are?
Yeah, so anyone is free to download and run a full node on the Dash network, just like they are with Bitcoin. These are servers that operate the network. They do things like keep a full copy of the blockchain. They relay messages around. Masternodes are special nodes that have additional responsibilities on our network.
Mm-hmm.
In order to upgrade your full node on the network, you simply need to, there's a prerequisite, if you will, that you prove ownership over 1,000 Dash. Now, currently that's about $80,000, so it's not a small amount of money. And the way that it works is you sign a special message from the private cryptographic keys underlying an address on the network that has 1,000 Dash in it. And when you do that, you upgrade your node on the network from a regular full node to a master node. Masternodes have certain responsibilities and certain privileges.
Mm-hmm.
On the responsibility side, they have to perform certain functions for the network. That includes coordinating private send transactions. They also need to participate in signing of chain locks and instant send, these features that we've built on top of the network. In exchange, they are paid by the network for providing those services. Currently, they're paid somewhere around 60 to 70 Dash a year in rewards.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about 6 or 7% of the 1,000 Dash that they prove ownership over. They also get a right to vote on the proposals. These are people that are heavily invested in the coin and have a say in how the available resources are allocated out to the teams that are looking to serve the network. And so that's basically what masternodes are. The reason for the 1,000 Dash collateral is that it prevents any one person from controlling this layer of the network. If it were essentially free to upgrade your node to a masternode, someone could come in and theoretically create thousands of these things and basically control our network. By requiring the 1,000 Dash collateral, it really prevents any one entity from controlling a significant number of them.
Right.
And that ensures that it's decentralized and can safely perform some of these functions that we're talking about, because it becomes very, very difficult to control that layer of the network. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Dash would be required in order to act in a malicious way on the network, as an example.
Right, exactly. And, I think that, maybe to the true, let's say, decentralized, ultra purist Bitcoiner, crypto dude kind of a person, that a governance structure like this might, sort of kind of come across as something that is a little bit, has elements of centralization. But however, when you look at something like the Bitcoin network, which, on paper is totally decentralized, you find that without these kinds of structures in place, there can be elements of sort of hidden centralization. Do you agree?
I do. I think that um, it, it, these are decentralization is not something that's binary, where you're
Mm,
either decentralized or centralized.
right.
Centralized is very easy to identify,
Hmm.
but decentralized is more of a continuum. You're
Uh-huh.
never fully decentralized.
Right, right.
And in Bitcoin's network, um, the decision makers are the miners
Hmm.
uh, on almost all issues. And when it comes to things like scalability, the block size, whether or not to implement SegWit, all of these decisions are essentially made by the miners. And there's a handful of them that control the majority of the network. Um, you know, there are pictures of meetings between, 4 to 6 people that have more than half the hash rate on the Bitcoin network. And that's the threshold for making decisions. So you could literally have a conference table of the number of people that have decision-making authority over the network. Um, to claim that that's decentralization, I think, or absolute decentralization is absurd. Um,
Hmm.
with Dash's network, we have the same level of centralization over our mining as they do, but we've introduced this additional layer, the masternode layer. And in order to control the network, you would need to control both. And in the case of the masternodes, we've done analytics on it. It's, and
Hmm.
on voting behavior, on um, uh, taint analysis. This is where the same transaction or a transaction contains inputs from more than one of the master nodes.
Hmm.
And we've analyzed it a number of different ways. It appears like you would need hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals in order to control the majority of the network. And so in terms of this continuum
Yeah.
of decentralization, I think we've managed to achieve a higher level of decentralization than most other networks just because of the fact that we've layered on additional requirements.
Right.
And so I think that it's disingenuous to say that this is centralization. I think if anything, it's an additional layer of decentralization.
Right, right, exactly. Like it's sort of like uh, addressing the problem proactively rather than allowing, for example, people to buy large amounts of Dash, just as it is on the Bitcoin network where people hold large amounts of Bitcoin. And just today we saw, I mean, just a absolutely perfect BART chart with a movement over 10,000 and then a movement back under. We're recording this on Tuesday, June 2nd. In any case, I want to ask you about a recent update to that the Dash Core group proposed involving changes to improving Dash's economics. So can you tell me a little bit more about this proposal?
Yeah, so it's actually a series of proposals so that we can break up each individual decision. We
Mm-hmm.
did it that way because each decision could be implemented on its own. It's not part of necessarily a package, but they're all aimed at improving the way that the network works from an incentive standpoint and from an economic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of the unique challenges with masternodes operating on the network is that they can create demand for Dash in the form of uh, masternode operators creating new masternodes. And when rewards are high for operating a masternode, it tends to lead to the creation of more of them. It makes sense, right? That when you incentivize something, more of it happens. Uh, that has the effect of removing Dash effectively from circulating supply
Mm-hmm.
in order to collateralize these masternodes. And the opposite can happen. When rewards are lower, it can result in a flood of new Dash entering the market as masternode operators cease operating. And this dynamic played out in 2017, 2018, 2019 in a pretty dramatic fashion. 2015, 2016, 2017, in that time period, there were more masternodes being created, demanding more Dash than was entering the market through mining.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, we had a dramatic spike in price back in early 2017, even before the rest of the market during that bull run. And it really led to an unsustainable situation.
Mm-hmm.
After mid 2017, the growth in the circulating supply of Dash exceeded 20% throughout 2018 and accelerated to something like 25% in 2019. And you can't grow your supply that quickly and maintain price and market confidence and things like that, especially when coins like Bitcoin are growing at around 2% annually. And Litecoin is growing around 4% on an annualized basis. And it's all due to the dynamics of the Masternode system. We've done a lot of analysis to try to understand those dynamics better, mm-hmm. so that we can change the economics and the reward structure in a way that stabilizes that. Uh-huh. And so our hypothesis, and we present a number of different analyses that statistically show that this is the case, but essentially prior to mid 2017, a lot of Dash's outperformance in the market was due to these dynamics. And since mid 2017, our relative underperformance is due to these dynamics. Okay. And the proposals that we're putting forward will fix those disincentives that have been there for the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. We've seen that our growth in terms of transaction counts, users, wallets, active addresses, all of those things have been extremely positive over the last 2 years. And during that same time period, our price has declined, and our relative market ranking has declined. Mm-hmm. And we believe it's due in part, certainly not exclusively, but in part because of these economic issues that underlie the network. And so the changes we're proposing will reallocate some of the rewards in a way that would cause that to stabilize. We have very strong evidence that we can do so in a very safe way without compromising the safety of the network. And we're confident that it will have a stabilizing effect on our relative market performance. And so we put forward our case, and we'll shortly put that to a formal proposal on the network to vote on. But that's basically the idea. We're also proposing some changes to the governance system. Okay. Right now, a fixed 10% is allocated towards our proposal system. And if it isn't spent, those coins are simply never created. That's worked far better than it does for other projects that are basically donation based. Mm-hmm. But what we found is during 2017, 2018, during the bull run of cryptocurrencies, we either had portions of the proposal system completely unallocated because there weren't enough quality proposals, mm-hmm. or we found that the network was quite wasteful. They viewed it as better to spend it than waste it, and basically approved a bunch of dubious proposals from unproven proposal owners. Okay. And neither of those things are desirable. Right. Meanwhile, back in 2019, when the price of Dash reached as low as $40, a lot of good projects were being defunded. And okay. A lot of Masternode owners wished they could allocate more. And so we want to create a more flexible funding model that allows for that to change over time. And we've introduced a number of changes that would basically allow for that to take place, as well as create a healthy dynamic in which, approving more proposals isn't essentially, quote, free money.
Right, right.
It basically has a implications for the masternode owners themselves, and essentially comes partially out of their pockets. And so
Mhm.
that should create a healthier dynamic where they're not willing to, approve just anything,
Right.
and at the same time have the flexibility to allocate more if they want to. And so that's what we're aiming for there. There is a third change that we're proposing, which is simply a change to our fee structure on the
Mm-hmm.
network, and
Mm-hmm.
that one is something that we plan on doing periodically, just to keep fees in line with the costs of operating.
Okay, I see. Um, can you talk a little bit more about what's next on the roadmap for Dash? So we see that something called the Dash platform is next. Can you explain what that is?
Yes, so Dash platform is something we've been working on for a long time, and we've gone through several iterations on what that looks like. We're nearing completion on that project at this point, and essentially what it is it's an enhancement to the network that allows data to be stored within the Dash network itself. We're already familiar with this concept if you are familiar with Ethereum and smart contracts. The difference is smart contracts actually execute code within the network.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, you're running a program within the Ethereum network, and that program is basically running on 4,000 computers across the globe, and being executed in parallel with each other, and then reconciled across those 4,000 servers. That isn't very efficient. It isn't necessary for all use cases. In contrast, what we're talking about is something we're terming data contracts.
Mm-hmm.
It allows an application to store data within the network, retrieve it from the network, but the compute takes place locally on your phone or on a server or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
locally.
Right.
And so that's far more cost effective. Um, in Ethereum, smart contracts are called unstoppable code. Well, that's good if your code works well, but if there's a bug in it, it can have catastrophic consequences. And so we actually think that there's very few use cases where that's actually needed. And it's far more efficient and effective to simply store data within the network. And basically what this enables is completely new use cases and a much better user experience. The
Mm-hmm.
first application we're going to be rolling out is called Dash Pay, and it basically brings the experience of using Venmo or a similar application to Dash. You'll be able to set up a username. You'll be able to establish friends and a contact list within the network. So I'd be able to search for Rachel, and Rachel would see a friend request from Ryan, and you'd be able to accept that. And now we just pay each other's usernames rather than arranging for cryptographic addresses outside of the network through email or something. And so it allows for a much more familiar payment experience. And the great part is I can then log in from my tablet, and I can have the same contact list on my tablet that I have on my phone. And when I make a payment in one, it shows up in the application on the other. It also allows legacy applications to integrate into the network. You could imagine an invoicing app that sends a payment request to you with an invoice number, an order number, any other information the programmer wanted to include, and you'd be able to make a payment back and include a purchase order number or a internal reference number or a note saying thank you, or making a special request. It also allows for the user profiles to be set up. So you can store your contact information, your email address, your shipping address, your phone number, And rather than have to type all of that stuff in when you place an order, when you place it with Dash, it will just prompt you and send the requested information without having to type anything in. So we're trying to make the payment experience with Dash very fluid, very familiar, and basically take all the friction out of making a transaction. And we think when you do that, you open up cryptocurrency to new users that otherwise wouldn't consider it. And you also, just accelerate the growth rate of the network. And so
Right.
this is the next thing that's coming. We're on testnet now. We're about to roll out a version that includes light client support for things like phones. And so we're getting very close at this point to being able to roll it out to our mainnet.
Okay, very exciting. Brian, we're just about out of time, so I want to thank you so much for this conversation. It's been so cool to talk to you, for me, who is a nerd, and also so great to see all the progress that Dash is making. Can you tell our listeners where they can find a little bit more information about you and about Dash?
Well, the place to start with Dash is on our website. It's dash.org. And there's links to many other resources there, including our forum, which is where a lot of our community resides, as well as a lot of different chat type communities like our Discord channels. And so there's just a number of different ways that you can learn more about the network and interact with the community. We also have links to service providers for merchants or for traders. We also have a gift card program where you can earn discounts for using Dash. It's basically a Dash back program. If you transact and purchase a gift card, you can actually get some of that purchase value back. That's at giftcards.dash.org. And so, yeah, there's a number of ways you can actually incorporate using cryptocurrency into your daily life and save money doing it. Yeah, there's just a ton of resources there that you can explore.
Okay, Ryan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.